All right, balancers. Today I'm joined by the Chief Product Officer for Nootopia. He has created high performance experiential nutritional supplements that help reverse some elements of addiction and disease, as well as improve neurological performance and take it to a nearly superhuman level. Something I know I'm personally interested to hear more about, and something I know the listeners are really excited to hear about too. We're going to be speaking about the brain. We're going to be talking about brain fog. We're going to be talking about diverting and really optimizing high performance. So things that everyone loves to hear when it comes to really optimizing not only their life balance, just the quality of life and their overall enjoyment of it. So it's my pleasure to welcome Mark Effinger to the show today. Mark, a big warm welcome.
Wonderful to see you, Erica. Thanks so much for the invite, by the way.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. You go by Mr. Noots as well. So what would you prefer I call you, Mark or Mr. Noots?
Either one is fine. It was that was a moniker given to me by Matt Gallant, the CEO of the company, as we were merging our two companies together. And Matt said, "Hey, let's protect your brand just in case anything goes sideways in our relationship." So it was a really smart thing to do, and I feel really lucky to have been blessed, Mr. Noots.
Love it. It's like a little IP trademark you've inherited. Lovely.
Yeah, you can feel the copyright sign.
Yeah, I can see it. Right? Yeah. So one thing I want to, I guess, start with, and this is something that I personally am always really genuinely curious to hear about and understand, and it's when founders have created either a service or a product just off the back of something that they've struggled with, something they found challenging. And I know this is something that resonates with you. I mean, in your own kind of background, struggles with health issues along the way as well, that kind of led you to a bit of a turning point where you started Nootopia. So can you walk us through, I guess, your journey to starting the business and what was really the impetus behind you creating this incredible brand?
Absolutely. So the first part was I had a health crisis back in the early 90s where I was a white rat for a drug called Accutane. I had cystic acne. I was in the military. You kind of sign your life away when you're in the military. And so that was like my first, challenge that I had to face. I had chronic depression. I had a chronic nasal drip that was just awful, about a pint a day. And I'm sure that my partners thought, as I would rush out of the conference room, I'm sure they thought that I was trying to do a line of blow or something. And it was really just I could not control this. And I had chronic fatigue along with that. And so my first great epiphany was meeting an NDMD who diagnosed me as hypothyroid, and realizing the difference between thyroid supplementation and without, and this 6-month journey that I made with him, and suddenly feeling like a freaking rock star after that point. And I was building multiple businesses at the time. I had a technology company that I had a good CEO in charge of, but I was still in charge of product development and marketing. And it seems to be the way that I always end up launching these companies.
That's your little slot, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'll launch them. I'll get them going. I get about 7 to 20 employees, and I say, I don't like managing people. I really love managing technology and marketing and projects. So yeah, so that's kind of how that went. And then my wife and I at the time, that would just opened our eyes to natural health and the fact that you can actually do things to modify your performance level. And for me, the simple thing of taking desiccated thyroid made a profound difference in my health, wellness, my clarity, my focus, and my overall joy, because I started enjoying work again and started really getting into it and taking on way too much, which is my typical way to do things.
Your signature.
And right. Maybe a few of your listeners might understand that one. What happened though is we started having babies. So we had 3 children, all born at home, all natural births. The first one, Kaylee, was in a hot tub. My son, Dustin, was in a birthing chair in the master suite of our home. And my youngest daughter was born on a beautiful black Italian leather couch in front of a roaring fireplace. So it was great. It was great. And I really loved the experience, one of being with my wife in that environment, and also just kind of that bonding that you get with your child when you have that really intimate experience of, whether it's cutting the cord or just the baby's crowning, and I remember my wife on the last birth was grabbing my hand and just about crushed it as she looked at me with those eyes and she said, "You're getting cut." And then Livy was released from the womb. So that was her call to birth control. So, so it's great. The event that happened, my wife had fairly narrow hips. She tore a little bit, and the midwife, this is back before the Sackler family had taken over the painkiller industry, and they gave my wife 4 oxycodone, and my wife found her muse for life, and that was both the start of her journey through drug dependence, and 10 years later, she committed suicide on that very same drug. So it was a harrowing event. Super talented, bright, very capable woman, great mom at times, and to see her go down that hole of desperation and hell, and finding all kinds of creative ways to get her fix was just a very sad event. So I started. I was pretty pissed, as you can imagine, that the doctors would keep feeding her this drug that she didn't need, but had an emotional connection with. I kind of called back to I had some neurochemistry background and had worked with some products on neurochemistry as well as human growth hormone work back in the 90s. And I called that up again. We moved all the way across the state, Washington State, we were at the time. And I just started formulating compounds in an effort to help people get off of addictive drugs. I felt that for some reason, very much like whether it's cancer or some other state, is the systems that have been instituted and put together to try to help people and try to eliminate these diseases didn't seem to be moving in the right direction, or at least at the speed that, as an entrepreneur, I wanted to move. So I sought some great assistance from. I had a brainstorming software company at the time that I co-founded with the founder of Century 21 Real Estate, and so I had a bunch of really smart people who used software to get brighter and more creative, and I was able to tap into them and say, "Hey, I'm trying to do this thing. I'd like to help people get better cognitive performance and use that as a launching pad for getting off of addictive behavior." And so I started working with a thing called Nootropics, which are brain enhancing natural substances or precursors to neurochemicals. And that was where it got fun, because in the 3,000 prototypes that I created prior to making the first working model of a solution, I started discovering these attributes or states that could be accomplished with certain neurochemical precursor compounds. You mix this with this and a little bit of this, you get rid of your inflammatory response and you get a little antioxidant levels increased, and suddenly your body starts working really well. And then you can say, hold it, now that my body isn't being kind of weighted down by these, typical conditions we have are high inflammation from either poor foods or other attributes of we're not exercising enough, those kinds of things. We often have oxidative stress. We often have adaptogenic issues where our adrenal gland is overperforming, and suddenly we're in fight or flight constantly. And so by managing those and finding kind of eliminating those first, or at least, pressing them to a point where they're not problematic, you could suddenly start adding very small doses of neurochemical precursors, typically amino acid chelates and similar, and signaling molecules that would tell the brain, hey, I could use a little bit more acetylcholine so I could think clearer. Or I could use a little bit of dopamine because I need some reward and I need some drive. So that's really the key, right? Like, we all want to be able to get into the states of performance that we kind of fall across or we stumble across once in a while in our lives. The state of flow, right? Where you suddenly, time goes away. I remember when I was young, when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, and first started working on science, my mother would have to call me in from the shed out behind the house where I was doing these chemistry experiments. And I would do those till midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, just because I had no scope of time, because I was so into the flow state of investigation and curiosity. And that can be very powerful, right?
Absolutely.
So that's one. Focus was another. I'm the poster child for ADHD. And so being able to get into a deep state of focus that's sustainable, and I know kind of how long it's going to last and what I can do during those periods, becomes a power tool. And so nootropics were the power tool and state change were the power move. And that's kind of what I discovered in this process. And it became really valuable. And then people started asking for these solutions. There's some great background on the first guy that did it. I was on a Match.com date, and it's his the girl I was having a date with, her former boyfriend was at the bar, and we called him over, and he was a well-known British photographer for Sports Illustrated magazine. And he we were talking, and I said, "What's your biggest problem in physiology and neurology?" He goes, "I can't focus to save my life. I get distracted by everything." So of course I hand him a test tube of crappy tasting powder and a capsule. And I said, "Well, try this next time." And he goes, "Cool, man." He goes, "I'm flying out to go shoot Blade Runner," the guy they call Blade Runner, who was Pistorius, the guy with the fiberglass and carbon fiber legs, who was a sprinter. And he texted me from that photo shoot, and he goes, "Dude," he goes, "I got the shot. They had 20 handlers, and not one of them could blow my shot." And he goes, "Thanks so much. This is awesome. How do I get more?" And I was still prototyping at the time. I didn't have more. Yeah, right. Oh no. Yeah. Careful what you wish for.
That's incredible. Mark, I want to thank you so much for being just open with your journey. I can't even imagine how difficult, that time would have been for you. And it's really nice to hear, I guess, how you've grown from different challenges and experiences in your life, and you're now, diverting that, and you're kind of bringing back a passion you had as a young star and sharing this with the world. And I think a lot of people listening can really resonate with having had moments in their life where they feel in flow, where time isn't important. But I have to say, a lot of those people listening now won't feel like that thing for them is their job, right? For them, it might be a side hobby, a habit, just something else they do in their time. And I think one key thing to understand with nootropics, right, because it's not something a lot of people have either experimented with or heard about. I think the key thing to understand about it, and I mean, you're the expert, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's actually a way to supplement different neurotransmitters in the brain. So it's not like you're taking a stimulant per se, right? Because I think a lot of misconception sometimes is it's like having coffee or, taking something that's going to heighten your experience. I think a key understanding is that it steps in and, kind of bolsters those neurotransmitters that we already have or already should naturally be producing, but kind of just optimizes them. In kind of your experience, is that the correct way to describe nootropics? And if so, what do you think are the main ones that people are deficient in that give them kind of trouble with focus or being in flow or just being concentrated at any given moment?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. One of the things that we learned early on is you don't feed people the neurotransmitter that they need. You feed people the precursors to the neurotransmitter and let your body do its natural work to then convert it to the components you need in the right ratios you need at the right time with all of the right support instruments. If you think of it as a band, your neurotransmitters, you got one that's a bass, maybe that's dopamine. You've got your drums, and that might be noradrenaline, norepinephrine or adrenaline. You got acetylcholine, right, which is a vocalist. It's memory, it's recall, it's thinking and clarity. And you might have serotonin, which is more mood stabilization, so that you can control your moods, and you find that, and that might be the guitar. So you don't want to artificially inseminate your brain with these neurochemicals. You want to get the precursors. There's a number of natural extracts that are really effective precursors, and by implementing those with, again, these support molecules, and also, again, working to reduce the amount of oxidative stress and the adrenal output, those factors, you can actually pull yourself into these states. Flow is a great one, right? So you're going to have a bit of dopamine in there. That's a pretty essential one for that. But you're also going to have enough acetylcholine that you actually are able to kind of access some of the insights that you may have collected over the decades And so they're easily available, and you can pull them up as you need. Because when you're doing deep work, it's really essential that you're not struggling. You want a little bit of struggle on the precipice of the start of deep work. You don't want something so easy that you don't have to work at it. You want it hard enough that you have to work at it. You have to think of it. You also have to have high curiosity and interest. And that can convert, if done right, can convert to passion. And when you suddenly become passionate about something, the amount of fuel, cognitive fuel, as well as as emotional fuel, is so high that everything seems engaging, interesting, and fun, and that will keep you, working in that process for an extended period of time. So, with the neurochemical precursors, what you're doing is and that's what nootropics do so well, is you're giving your body these precursors, and you're using signaling in the brain to say, okay, now I've got all the raw components I need for this. Let's convert it at the rate that you need it for this event that you're going to do. And you can actually get into a state change or state optimization. You can close your eyes, you can get into a state. If you could just go to a memory of something that really cool that's happened, or a relationship that's really you love, or that you have this interesting thing, or a paragraph you read somewhere that was motivating, you can go into that state immediately. Our tools, our power tools, are this nootropic for you to be able to get into that state on a reliable basis for the length of time you need to get into that state to perform the things that are important to you. That's kind of the promise of nootropics. For anybody that's seen Bradley Cooper walking up the steps in the movie Limitless, and he's walking up the steps of his apartment, and he's taken the clear pill, and suddenly the lights are a little brighter. His eyes are a little bluer, and he hears the spokes of the bicycle wheel as it's turning. And then he sees, and he glances at a book in the book bag from his landlord's wife's college course, and all of a sudden he gets this flood of recall. He can kind of sense her emotions. That's the ultimate promise of nootropics. Is we all would love to get to that state where we're so in tune with what's going on, we're so sensitive to what's going on, and we're so capable that we don't hesitate to make the moves that help us get to the next level in our lives. Right? Whether it's writing some great copy, or it's having the wisdom and the bravery to go step out on your own after having a corporate gig. Those are all things that require a state change. And we just have these really cool tools that help you get there faster, better, and sustainably. And one of the most important parts of that, Erica, is that these are not a replacement for your performance. These are, again, they're power tools to help you get there. But in the process of utilizing these solutions, you're building new neural pathways in your brain and new emotional pathways in your body that allow you to get into that state easier and faster, with or without the nootropics, over time.
Yeah, and I think the thing I love about it, and I have to say, your team kindly sent me a whole bunch of stacks to try, and I have been loving them. I really have. I'm still experimenting with, because in the book it kind of has different themes, I guess, of stacks. So I've been like trying to save them for days where I have things so I can really optimize them. But the thing I love about it, and the thing I know will resonate with a lot of the people listening, is it's not a medicine, it's not antibiotic or anything like that that feels artificial. It's something that actually supports the natural functioning of your body. And I think this is a really key thing to understand, because it can be really hard sometimes when you're seeing a lot of things on the market, especially when it comes to performance and focus. And I think anything that's stimulating your natural bodily functions can be really off-putting and put you in a completely different state to where you actually want to be. But these function in a way to support your natural state of being, which is something I really, really appreciate. Just coming from like an alternative medicine already point of view, that's kind of my point of preference, to then utilize something that helps you kind of connect with the state you should already be in, I think is incredible. But it kind of leads me to wonder as well, are these used to bring us back to a baseline that we should already be at, and for whatever reason we feel deficient in certain areas? or is it overall a tool to just take it to the next level? So I guess what I'm asking, and I understand like everyone's baseline is going to be a little bit different, but generally speaking, are these used to fill gaps in things that we're deficient in? And if so, can you kind of speak to the reason why we might be deficient naturally in some of these precursors or the neurotransmitters themselves?
Well, I don't want to get into factory farming, but maybe we should. Is a
Wherever
lot
you
of
want to take it.
yeah. Well, there's a couple of inherent issues that we're dealing with, a few that we're dealing with regularly. One is the pace of change in our lives has changed dramatically from when we were agrarian farmers to where we are today, sitting behind electronic devices trying to beat a millisecond calls on the trading floor. So the amount of stress that we're dealing with on a regular basis is so high that it has modulated our baseline significantly. So we've got this stress from poor food. We have relationship stress, which is greatly expanded thanks to social media. And even though I really love social media and a lot of the things it's allowed me to do, like the 0 degree of distance from anybody that I really want to have a communication with is really a beautiful blessing. At the same time, we also feel a maintenance level that we have to try to keep those relationships going, right? There's a certain amount of really, and I don't know how
Upkeep.
many times at 1 in the morning I've maybe woken up and I'm going, oh, I really should reach out to X because I owe them a call or I owe them a ping in some way, or at least text them a hi. And it's a little stress event that accumulates over time. And those also affect all of our emotional states. Our baselines have degraded to a certain extent. Hustle culture. I love Gary Vee, but hustle culture has also been it's both a blessing and a curse. In like let's get out there and move the needle in our lives and in other people's lives. Let's go support them. And at the same time, let's be on 24/7, and there's no downtime, and there's no time for us, and it has that can have a really negative impact. So from my perspective, we even wrote a book on it called Sick to Superhuman. Our experience is that most people in some part of their lives have, or physiology and neurology, are not healthy, and that can be a result of. I was an incredible athlete when I was younger. And I'm still an athlete today, but when I was younger, I was measurable, effective athlete, right? Well, as I started building my first business back in 1986, I spent a lot more time in the laboratory and working 18, 20-hour days than I did when I was younger, where I would go to I would clock into my job, I would clock out of my job, I would bicycle to and from my work. I would go running immediately after work. I'd go lift weights for an hour, and then I might go mountain climbing, or I might go hang gliding, or road race motorcycles, or something like that. And just the amount of general activity and the venting that happened from that, the release of all of these what would otherwise be cortisol inducing events suddenly became pleasurable. When your knee is on the pavement, you're going around at 120 miles an hour, and you've got a throttle to make the back end of your motorcycle shift so that you can actually make it through that hairpin turn. There's a little white knuckle, but there's so much pleasure and dopaminergic joy when you make it around that corner. That was going on every day. Today, you and I wake up in the morning. We may have a ritual, like I'll do some meditation, and I've got my newts that I take, and my water and the drinks that I have, and a gratitude journal and those things. If I don't do those things, and I didn't for many years, I start from a negative baseline, but
Yeah,
with
you
a
start
little
from the
bit.
heightened stress state already.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And there was a number of years where I woke up and the first thing I did was I grabbed my phone. I looked at
Mm.
all of the stressful events that I was going to have to attack that day. And then, I lived that cortisol induced life. Since then, with the help of nootropics, I've raised my baseline, and every year my baseline goes up higher. I do biofeedback as well, neurofeedback. I do everything I can to help me. I'm 61 years old, so I don't want to look, feel, or operate like the 61-year-olds I see at the local supermarket. And it's not a, hopefully it'd be a clarion call to them where they go, hey, I want to be like that guy. Cause cool blue coat, what?
Oh, I got to say, for everyone watching on video, you certainly don't look 61. So the newts are doing their job. And I
Right.
guess it comes down to a holistic approach to your life as well. I mean, I know you're just talking about like the morning routine and battling with that. What's the word? It's almost like a pull to check your phone first thing in the morning. We all experience it. I can hands down say I still, even though I have my morning routine, it's something I still experience. If you can do little things like, have mindfulness in the morning, have your routine, experiment with nootropics, things like that, that raise your baseline. It's almost like you're adding blocks to your foundation, right, before you start your day. And that makes whatever is ahead of you for the rest of the day that little bit more manageable. Doesn't mean you're never going to encounter stress, you're never going to deal with challenges, but this whole conversation is really geared at just arming you to function at your most potential. I think one thing that people would also regularly struggle with, something I used to a lot more, to be honest, regularly not so much, probably because of the newts, to be honest with you, but it is something to do with brain fog. I just wanted to, I guess, get your thoughts on why that actually happens. Like, what are the neurotransmitters potentially that we're missing? Do you often see like a really common factor that goes into people with brain fog? And if so, I mean, I know on your website you have like a little questionnaire for people to fill out for what they're struggling with, so that it's recommended what they need. But just on the topic of brain fog, because I think it's quite a universal one, what are kind of the factors that go into why we experience that, and then what are the precursors or the neurotransmitters that we need to bolster to counteract that?
I love that question. This is a big one for me. There were years where, especially when I was hypothyroid, and afterward, where I literally couldn't focus. I mean, I had this constant. It wasn't just a brain fog; it was actually a visual fog. I couldn't focus for any period of time, and you lose if you take a look at the secondary and tertiary byproducts of that. If you can't focus well, your level of accomplishment goes down, and it's measurable. If you can't focus well, and you've got this fog, all of the emotional ties that you normally would have in this deep connection with somebody, looking into their eyes or having that intimacy with them, go away. And so there are a number of secondary and tertiary issues that suddenly compound, and they become bigger than just the brain fog. On the brain fog front, there's a number of things. One is, and we have a solution for this in our Nootropics box that you get, and that is, we have a thing called mental reboot. We have an AM and a PM. So one of the factors is you start to get these plaques that build up in the brain that cause a lack of transmission between neurons. So it basically hampers the transmission between neurons, and also becomes an inflammatory overhead in the brain as well. So those are things. So there's a thing that happens during sleep, which is hypercritical for brain fog, by the way. During sleep, the brain shrinks slightly. And what it does is it opens up for a cerebral spinal fluid to flow around the capillaries, which you've got miles of capillaries in your brain. And the capillary wall is super thin. And that cerebral spinal fluid flows past it and pulls out toxins, beta amyloid plaques, tau proteins, and then the detritus that happens from mitochondrial output. Mitochondria is kind of the brain has a huge amount of mitochondria in neurons. And so you've got this output, right? It's exhaust that's happening as you're exciting these neurons and getting this activity happening. And so you want to be able to take advantage of your sleep cycle, which is naturally trying to detox you. Mm-hmm. It's enhancing that. And we have a product, again, Mental Reboot, that basically accelerates the detoxification of the brain. Then it brings that through the spinal, out the body. And that's one factor. So one is getting detoxification to a good level. Another is, of course, gut health. Get your gut healthy, get your microbiome in balance, eat the right foods, do some of those things. I have a couple of big forkfuls of sauerkraut first thing in the morning. And it's incredible that, and we have a thing called P3OM, which is a probiotic that we make at Optimizers, and some other factors. One is Capex. So I like to bring up certain levels of these certain neurochemical precursors so that my body is as elevated in its baseline. But on that fog front, we also often When the gut is out of balance, you're going to naturally have fog because the neurotransmitter connection on what's called the vagal nerve is, so between the gut and brain, we talk about the gut brain
Yeah.
connection, whereas there's a vagal nerve or the vagus nerve that is connecting those two. When the gut is out of balance, and 90 to 95% of the serotonin is made in the gut, 5% is triggered from the vagal nerve into the brain. So the serotonin doesn't flow through the blood-brain barrier, right? But it does trigger and create it. So we want to make sure that we have not too much serotonin, but definitely enough. If you don't have enough, and here's an indicator of where not enough is problematic, is when I was going through this hypothyroid crisis, is every time I would get a phone call, or this is prior to email becoming popular, I get a phone call or some indicator that something bad was going down in some way or another, or perceived bad to me at the time, is I would get this kind of rush of adrenaline. The cortisol would flow, and that would eat up the serotonin, would then try to flow in and go, hey, there's no tiger running after you right now. It's not a fight or flight event. You can settle down, but serotonin is burned up trying to settle your heart down.
Sure.
And when that happens, yeah, then you have it right. You're depleted of serotonin. You feel like crap. You have no motivation. You can't think very clearly. And that is brain fog. And it takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours for you to replace that if you've got a good diet and you exercise and do those things. But you just feel unmotivated and incapable of making good performance decisions at that point. So that's a big one. So you want to replace that. We have a thing called Upbeat, which is our selective serotonin product. And what it does, in contrast to, say, an SSRI, people know about antidepressants. An SSRI traps serotonin between the synapse, and it keeps it reflowing through the synapse. Okay, and that's this. So it doesn't flow through the synapse and then get used up through. There's an enzyme that would normally break it down. It actually keeps flowing back and forth. When it does that, it naturally signals the brain saying, hey, I've got enough serotonin to last forever. And as a result of that, it quits creating serotonin. So as soon as the SSRI runs out, your serotonin depleted. What we do in contrast is we give you, again, all of these precursors to serotonin, and then we signal your brain to say, hey, I've got all the precursors. How much serotonin do you need? Do you want some now? We've got some. We got as much as you want, as much as you need. And it allows it to flow in with always a surplus sitting in the background so that you never run out of serotonin. So that's one way to solve that problem. In the mental reboot pairing, which, by the way, it's really important, is it's two things. It's a capsule you take at night that helps to amplify that detoxification process that happens in the brain while you sleep, and it's a sublingual in the morning, meaning you hold it upright, you tap it a little bit, you pull the top off, and you pour it under your tongue. And what it does is you spoke about baselines earlier, Erica. And it does that. It basically raises your baseline of cognitive performance so that everything else you do on top of that is another step up.
Bonus.
Yeah, and that's kind of my solution to that. But there's a number of neurochemical. Whenever you have neurochemical imbalance, you're going to have either brain fog or agitation, or you're going to have mood issues, or you're going to have personality, dysfunction. And so getting all of those in balance for you, there's that neurochemical test at the top of our website. When you take that, what it helps us to know is what do you have a dominance in as a neurochemical, and what do you have a lack of, so that when we custom formulate your nootropics for you, we build it around those factors so that we boost the ones you're weak in, and we don't hyperactivate the ones that you already have a surplus of.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out, because it's, when these things are available to you and you have access to them, sometimes you assume you know what you need. But I think something like, I had a little play with the test on your site, because you guys sent me a whole box, and I just thought it was great to see like a little test that you can. It's really personalized. Like you can fill it out in terms of what you're struggling with, your energy, your mood, what you want to increase or feel more of. And I think that's really important before you kind of go on the journey of trying or experimenting with any of these things. But yeah, I think brain fog is a big one. And of course, paired with, if you want to optimize, I guess, the experience or experimentation, shall we say, with something like nootropics, I think a couple key things there that go hand in hand that are like from a holistic point of view that I know from our conversation is something you do as well is really making sure sleep is on point, your hydration
Oh
and
yeah.
your diet, and that you're moving, because all of these things work together. And from my understanding, the way the nootropics work is to come in and support the natural order of your body. If your thyroid's out, if things aren't working, if things aren't transmitting, brain receptors, things like that, these come in to support that. But of course, you can't expect to scrape through with zero sleep, because how is sleep detoxification going to work if you're not sleeping? So definitely paying attention to the little things that we all know that we don't need to be told to do more of or pay attention to. Definitely need a reminder at this point. But Mark, I wanted to ask you, if people want to follow along your journey, I mean, I know we've really only scraped the surface of a lot of the things that are in your brain to disseminate and share with everyone. And I'm sure that you have little pockets of space and time on the internet where you potentially share that around. So where's the best place they can connect with you firstly? And of course, check out the products and take the quiz to suss out, I guess, where they might be lacking in.
I love it. I love it. So we've got a Facebook group at Nootopia. So Facebook/Nootopia is a great place to visit us. And also we have a really badass mod there. Her name is Sarah Jessica, who is a rock star in helping. And what she does is as a moderator for both the Facebook page and also for me, is she will bring me individuals who have very specific issues that they would love to address or questions about how to optimize these things. And that works really well. Mark Effinger, EFF as in Frank, INGER, on Facebook as well. And then we have a great Nootopia Brain Instagram that we do call outs of some of these things where we try to summarize some of the points that you were making today in this and do it in a really succinct, 5, 10, 15 second sound bites to help you. And then feel free, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, it's Mr. Noots at Nootopia.com, mrnoots@Nootopia.com. Would love to have that. And I think you also have probably a coupon and a discount for your listeners as well, if they'd like to try our stuff.
Awesome, Mark. I'll pop links to all of that below. And your team has kindly also offered 10% off the products, the bundles, which I can definitely vouch for. And I'm excited to continue to try them. So guys, check out the codes in the show notes below, and that will give you 10% off all the incredible products. But Mark, I want to thank you so much for coming on. As I said, I feel like we've only, scraped the surface. So I'd love to have you back on in the future for another chat. And thank you so much for your time. It's really, really appreciated. And I know all of the listeners would have gotten a lot out of today's show.
Thank you so much, Erica. It was great to meet you. I'm so good. And let's do another. Well, there's some deep dives I would love to take with you. Sleep.
Absolutely.
Let's do a deep dive on sleep.
Incredible. I'll do even like a little poll on my social media and see what people want to hear more of. Anyone listening on Spotify, there's a little Q&A button on the episode. So use that to request anything you want us to dive deeper on, and we'll have Mark back on in the near future.
Awesome.